everybody, welcome to another episode of Card Talk, a podcast where we spend a little bit of time talking about cards from Lord of the Rings, the card game. And I'm your host, Dave Walsh.
And I'm Grant Thompson, just along for the ride. And today we are talking about Denethor. From the core set, he is an 8 cost, 1 willpower, 1 attack power, 3 defense points, and 3 hit point hero. He has the Gondor, Noble, Steward traits, and he has the action Exhaust Denethor and look at the top card of the encounter deck. You may move that card to the bottom of the encounter deck. What's your thoughts on Denethor?
First of all, let me talk a little bit about some non-playing stuff. If you look at his card art, I always thought that the card art of Denethor he looked a little like mean and sneaky and tricky, like he had something up his sleeve, which kind of matches with what his ability is and what his game text is. So I thought that was pretty neat. Overall, I am not a fan of Denethor. I think his ability is just not that good for being a hero. I get it. Like, you can turn over the top of the encounter deck. You can see if you want it or not want it, and then you can put it at the bottom if you don't want it. But that doesn't mean that the next encounter card is something that you're going to want anyways. Having said that, there are a couple of things that I do like. First of all, his the hit points to attributes all add up to the 8 threat that he costs. So I like that it's balanced that way. I also like the fact that he's an 8 threat cost hero. To get into the lore sphere. And that in and of itself, whether you use his ability or not, he's kind of a big defender. Whenever I end up using Denethor, I end up using him as my all-time defender because he does have those 3 big defense points. So he's got some good, but overall I'm just not necessarily a fan of him. What do you think, Grant?
I actually like Denethor, especially throughout the core set in the Shadows of Mirkwood cycle. I used him extensively. He was pretty much my go-to defender. And other than a few times, I never actually used his ability until I reached Return to Mirkwood with those nasty Addercops. Loading them up with a couple of unexpected courages allows them to defend and scry the top card of the encounter deck, along with Hennemarth River Song. You're laughing. You've got pretty much complete control over the encounter deck. And yeah, some people will say, well, that's a cheating way of going about it. But Addercop has 8 attack and can pretty much one-shot every hero. So no, it's not cheating. It's survival. But yeah, I don't use his ability that much, because of the fact that I generally don't want to load Denethor up with more than 1 unexpected courage if I'm taking on multiple enemies or having multiple enemies to take. So he's definitely one of my most used core set heroes. I like bringing him along for me Done Here Duck Shoot deck and a couple of other decks I've used him in. David was talking about the card art. Yes, it is very much so the fact that he's very sneaky. He's always got a card up his sleeve. But if you've noticed, he's also holding one of the relics for the Rod of the Steward, which is another card from the leadership sphere that allows you to exhaust it, spend 2 resources, and draw a card. So it means that you've always got options, where that picture looks like, yeah, I'm a man with options, there's nothing I can't do, sort of thing. But for when he came out, you had 1 or 2 adventure packs, and then you had a Burning Brand, which, couple that with Denethor, at that point in time, there was very few enemies, save the Hill Troll, and, as I've said, Addercop, with more than 6 attack. So coupling them with Burning Brand, and you're laughing, there was very few enemies that could actually damage Denethor with the Burning Brand cancelling off shadow effects, and his 3 defense points If you couple that with Dunedain Warnings, that was also out around this time, he had up to a 6 defense if you were running one deck with Dunedain Warnings in what have you. If you had 2, well, then there's 9 defense. There's nothing breaking through that.
I see what you're saying, and I get with using Denethor as a blocker. He is a pretty decent blocker, especially for the 8 threat that he has. And it's his ability that just doesn't seem to wow me. And I feel like heroes at this point, with such a deep card pool after whatever it's been, 70 years of cards, I feel like the ability on heroes has to be something that can really knock my socks off. Something that really matches my style of play, and that's what I think we're getting at, is that I have a distinct style of play that I never really thought about until you and I started making these episodes, and then it became pretty obvious that I like low cost things. I like being low threat. I like threat. I like keeping my threat low. So those sorts of things are good in my book. The problem is that if I'm going to use Denethor's ability, I have to exhaust him. And yeah, I can throw an unexpected courage on him, and then I can use him to defend. But that means that I have to have a card slot to use the unexpected courage, and that's something that I don't necessarily want. Although unexpected courage can go on a lot of different heroes, so that's fine. You can couple Denethor if we're thinking about like core hero groupings. Denethor goes really well with Eleanor. You can use Denethor to look at the encounter card, and then you can use Eleanor to cancel the when revealed effects. The problem with that, though, is that you've burnt 2 heroes because they're both exhaust in order to use them, and then you're still not guaranteed any sort of control over the card that's coming underneath it, unless it just happens to be the end of the encounter deck and you don't have any cards to draw. So it's just, I don't know, like the encounter control is so hit or miss in my book that I don't want to use it.
The way Denethor works for the core set, I think when he came out, he was that like sort of, wow, he's a defender. Wow, he can turn the top card of the encounter deck and shove it to the bottom if you don't want to see it. Those untimely Necromancer's Reaches, not a problem. Denethor.
Sure. You can delay the effect of a Necromancer's Reach by putting it at the bottom.
But eventually you're going to see it. So yes, fair enough. It's not an ideal situation. You're losing. You may be burning a hero to get rid of a Necromancer's Reach, and out comes a Hummerhorn.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 50-50 gamble.
Right.
So it's all about whether you want to risk it or not. Me personally, like I've said, I haven't really used Denethor's ability, but I did like using Denethor as a hero, even as just a stout defender back in the core set days.
Right.
Before we had a hero like Baragon with 4 defense, or Dane with the 3 defense, but buffs all
does all
already.
The dwarf buffing.
Yeah.
It's funny you said something about risking, something or other, and it's funny because I looked up what I would use instead of Denethor in terms of ability, and I came up with Risk Some Light, because you can you don't get just one card, you can look at actually 3 cards, and you can pick one and put it at the bottom and then put the other 2 on top. And lo and behold, Risk Some Light, which is a card that I don't use often but still have used in a deck. It's funny that Risk Some Light is a secrecy card, which again goes into my, it's secrecy 3, which means it's a 0-cost card when you're playing in secrecy. It's so funny that's what ended up happening.
Yeah, again, risk some light. It's from the low sphere, so you could couple that with Denethor, along with, say, a Spirit Glorfindel, and that gives you 13 threat. You could couple that with Pippin, and you're in secrecy. And enemies have a +1 engagement. You've got access to the Spirit Sphere to keep your threat low, and you've got a defender there. Playing a few powerful hit allies, you're laughing. But to make a deck work, you've got to have more than just a couple of cards that allow you to scry the encounter deck. And for me, Denethor's ability doesn't put him above par with some of the newer heroes or even some of the newer allies that have come out since the release of, for example, the Sands of Harad, where you've got Weeeellll. After Weeeellll commits to the quest, look at the top card of the encounter deck, then you may discard that card. So it's basically doing a Denethor, but you're getting 3 willpower for it. You look at the top card, you don't like it, you discard it, you reveal another card in its place. So, at the end of the day, it's a more powerful version of Denethor.
And even in the Spirit Sphere, if I'm not going to use Denethor, again, I'm talking about his abilities. Defense kind of speaks for itself, but
yeah,
his ability, the Kelduin Traveler from the Nin Ylf, I never knew how to pronounce that adventure pack. Yeah, I didn't know if it was Ylf or Elf or I don't know.
I've always said it as Nin and Elf.
Okay.
I know I pronounce it wrong, but I don't know how it's.
Well, you're more learned in all the actual Tolkien stuff, so I'll take your word for it. But anyways, the Kelduin Traveler, it allows you to discard something completely out of play, and that sort of thing is neat. Like if you're gonna do some encounter scrying and encounter manipulation.
Another ally that allows you to look at the encounter deck, the Weeeellll Lookout for Secrecy 2. After Weeeellll Lookout enters play, look at the top card of the encounter deck. If it's an enemy, you may discard it.
Yeah, and I actually just built a secrecy deck specifically for location control, but I included the Weeeellll Lookout just so I can, reduce some of the enemies that are coming around, and that was a way for me to reduce enemies coming into play. So should we ring this guy?
That's just what I was about to suggest.
Okay, go ahead.
Right, so David, on the scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the one card to rule them all, 10 being the trash bin, as you so adequately put them, what would you ring Denethor as?
For me, he's going to be a high ring count, but I think he has 2 redeeming factors that are never to be overlooked for a guy who plays like I do. His threat cost is low, 8 for a non-hobbit. I think that's really good, and his defense is high. But all the other stuff is trash. I can't get beyond that stuff. So I think I was going in between a 7 and an 8, but I'm going to have to just give him an 8. I can't bring it down to a 7 because I want my heroes to be useful, more useful than an ally that I can bring into play with a 3 defense. What do you think, Grant?
Well, for me, other than the fact that he's low cost and he's got that high defense, there isn't much spectacular about Denethor. But I did like playing with Denethor as when the game came out. But like you said, the ability isn't on the wow factor anymore. Not since the release of allies that have the abilities that beat that. He's got a lot of wasted stats in his willpower and his attack power. And I'd like to see them go somewhere else. Maybe either an extra defensive point or an extra couple of hit points. Or even to not exhaust Denethor and look at the top card of the encounter deck. Maybe have that as a limit. Once per phase, you can look at it, or once or like twice per turn, you can look at the top card of the encounter deck and move it down. Instead of giving him willpower that is negligible and an attack power that you're probably not going to use because you've already used them to defend, it just seems a bit of a waste. Denethor is, for me, a hero I'd like to have seen better made, or at least had an errata to make it seem worthwhile to play him anymore. So for me, I'm going to give him a 6 rings, more out of sentimentality and the fact that I've had a lot of good use out of him up until the latest like releases.
That kind of wraps up our little discussion about Denethor, the lore hero. Join us next time as we talk about the Ithilien Archer, who is a lore ally from the Encounter at Amon Din Adventure Pack. Join us then. Have a great day.